The lights inside the arena had been turned down so low that the crowd looked like a sea of shadows. Thousands of people were packed into their seats, waiting. Some had been waiting for hours. Some had traveled across several states just to be there. And some had spent years dreaming about this exact moment. Tonight, they were going to see Elvis Presley. The stage was enormous, surrounded by golden curtains and bright spotlights. Musicians waited behind their instruments. The backup singers stood ready. The crowd was restless, whispering, laughing, calling Elvis's name. Elvis. 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 Then suddenly, the lights went completely black. The screaming became deafening. A few seconds passed, and then the first notes of the opening music filled the arena. The crowd exploded. Elvis walked onto the stage wearing a brilliant white jumpsuit decorated with gold and jeweled details. The spotlight followed him as he smiled at the audience. He raised one hand. The screaming became even louder. For the next several minutes, Elvis gave them exactly what they had come to see. Energy, confidence, music, that unmistakable stage presence. He moved across the stage, shaking hands with people in the front rows. Flowers landed near his feet. Scarves were tossed toward him. He smiled, laughed, and occasionally leaned down to greet a fan. But there was one person in the audience who wasn't screaming. One person who wasn't waving. One person who seemed completely frozen. His name was Daniel. He was 12 years old, and he was sitting in a wheelchair near the front of the stage. His mother sat beside him. She had spent months saving money for those tickets. Not because Daniel was a typical Elvis fan, but because Daniel had one dream. He wanted to see Elvis Presley perform live. Just once. Daniel had been sick for a long time. His body had become weaker over the years, and simple things that other children took for granted had become difficult for him. Walking, running, even standing for a few seconds. But music had always been different. Music made him forget what his body couldn't do. And Elvis was his favorite. There was an old record player in Daniel's bedroom. His mother had bought him Elvis records whenever she could find them. Daniel knew the songs. He knew the melodies. He knew the moments when Elvis would pause before a powerful line. Sometimes, late at night, his mother would find him asleep beside the record player. But tonight was different. Tonight Elvis was only a few yards away. Daniel couldn't believe it. He stared at the stage with wide eyes. His mother leaned toward him. "Are you okay?" Daniel nodded. But he wasn't really okay. He was overwhelmed. He was afraid that if he blinked, the moment would disappear. Elvis finished another song. The crowd erupted. He smiled, wiped his forehead, and reached for a towel. Then something caught his attention. It was small, almost invisible among thousands of people. A boy sitting in a wheelchair. Daniel wasn't cheering. He wasn't holding flowers. He wasn't trying to get Elvis's attention. He was simply staring. And there was something in his face that Elvis couldn't ignore. Elvis looked at him for a few seconds. Then he looked away. The band began preparing for the next song. But Elvis looked back again. This time he saw Daniel's mother. She was crying. Not loudly. She was trying to hide it. She wiped her cheek quickly and smiled at her son. Elvis stopped. The musicians were ready. The audience was waiting. But Elvis wasn't moving. The bandleader looked toward him, confused. Elvis raised his hand. "Hold on." The music stopped before it even began. The audience became strangely quiet. Elvis looked toward the front row. Then he pointed. "You right there." Daniel looked around. He wasn't sure Elvis was talking to him. Elvis smiled. "Yeah, son, I'm talking to you." The entire arena seemed to disappear. Daniel's mother covered her mouth. Daniel slowly pointed at himself. Elvis laughed softly. "Yes, you." The crowd applauded. Daniel smiled for the first time that night. Elvis walked toward the edge of the stage. "What's your name?" Daniel tried to answer. Nothing came out. He swallowed. His mother leaned closer. "Tell him." Daniel finally whispered his name. "Daniel." Elvis leaned closer. "Daniel." The boy nodded. "Well, Daniel, you came to see me." Daniel nodded again. Elvis smiled. "Well, I'm glad you came." The crowd applauded. But Elvis noticed something. Daniel wasn't smiling anymore. He was looking down at his hands. Elvis's expression changed. He could tell there was something else. Something Daniel hadn't said. Elvis lowered his microphone. "Are you having a good time?" Daniel nodded. "Best night ever." Daniel nodded again. Elvis smiled. "Then why do you look like you're about to cry?" Daniel's mother looked at Elvis. Then she looked at her son. She knew. Daniel had been keeping something inside all night. Elvis waited. He didn't rush him. The entire arena waited with him. Finally, Daniel lifted his eyes. "I..." His voice broke. Elvis leaned closer. "Take your time." Daniel took a breath. Then he said something that Elvis never expected to hear. "I just wanted to see you." He stopped. Elvis nodded. "I know." Daniel looked at him. "Before I can't hear anymore." The arena went silent. Completely silent. No cheering. No screaming. No applause. Nothing. Elvis's smile disappeared. He stared at the boy. Daniel's mother immediately lowered her head. Tears were running down her face. Elvis looked at her, then back at Daniel. "What did you say, son?" Daniel repeated it. "My hearing is getting worse." His voice trembled. "The doctors said it might not last." Elvis stood completely still. For the first time that evening, the superstar disappeared. There was no performer, no famous entertainer, just a man standing in front of a frightened child. Elvis slowly crouched down near the edge of the stage. "Daniel." He paused. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Daniel shrugged. "I didn't want to stop your show." Elvis's eyes filled with emotion. "You think you stopped my show?" Daniel looked confused. Elvis shook his head. "No, son." He pointed toward the stage. "This isn't more important than you." The crowd began applauding. Slowly, then louder. Daniel's mother covered her face. Elvis looked back at the musicians. He raised his hand. The musicians stopped moving. Elvis looked at Daniel again. "What song do you want to hear?" Daniel froze. "I don't know." "Sure you do." Daniel thought for a moment. Then he whispered the name of an Elvis song. Elvis smiled. "That's your song." Daniel nodded. Elvis looked toward the band. "Let's play it." The musicians began. The first notes floated through the arena. And something changed. The enormous concert hall suddenly felt intimate. Thousands of people were no longer watching a superstar. They were watching one man sing to one boy. Elvis walked down from the stage. The crowd gasped. Security moved quickly, but Elvis waved them back. He wanted to go himself. He walked directly toward Daniel. Then he stopped in front of the wheelchair. Elvis held out his hand. Daniel looked at it. Then at his mother. She nodded. Daniel reached out. Elvis gently took his hand. And for a few seconds, neither of them said anything. The music continued. Elvis looked at Daniel. "Can you hear me?" Daniel nodded. "For now." Elvis smiled sadly. "Then listen closely." He began to sing. His voice filled the arena. Daniel closed his eyes. His mother cried. And thousands of strangers sat completely still. Nobody wanted to interrupt the moment. Because everyone understood something. This wasn't just a concert anymore. It was a goodbye to a sound that a little boy was terrified of losing. Quick question for you. If you were sitting in that audience, what would you have done? A started crying. B stood up and applauded. C stayed completely silent and listened. Write A, B, or C in the comments. And tell us where you're watching from, your city and country. If this story is touching your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves emotional stories. Now let's return to that unforgettable night. The song continued. Elvis never looked away from Daniel. The boy's eyes were closed. For the first time that evening, he looked peaceful. When the song ended, the arena erupted. But Daniel didn't open his eyes immediately. He was holding onto every last note, every vibration, every sound. He wanted to remember it. Forever. Elvis squeezed his hand. Daniel. The boy opened his eyes. Elvis smiled. You hear that? Daniel nodded. The whole place is cheering for you. Daniel looked around. Thousands of people were standing. Some were crying. Some were applauding. Some had their hands over their mouths. Daniel looked overwhelmed. I didn't do anything. Elvis shook his head. You came here. He paused. Sometimes that's enough. Daniel smiled. Then Elvis noticed something on the boy's lap. A small notebook. He pointed at it. What's that? Daniel picked it up. My songs. Elvis laughed. You've got my songs written down. Daniel opened the notebook. Inside were handwritten titles. Some were crossed out. Others had little stars beside them. Elvis looked at the pages. Then he looked at Daniel. You really are a fan. Daniel finally laughed. The crowd laughed with him. For a moment, the sadness disappeared. But Elvis wasn't finished. He looked toward the stage. Then back at Daniel. Daniel. Yes. I think we should do something. What? Elvis smiled. Something your mother will probably never forgive me for. Daniel's mother laughed through her tears. Elvis turned toward the audience. I need a little help. The crowd immediately started cheering. Elvis looked at the musicians. Then he looked back at Daniel. Tonight. He paused. We're going to change the show. And nobody in that arena could have imagined what Elvis was about to do next. The crowd was still applauding when Elvis turned back toward Daniel. The boy was smiling now, but there was still uncertainty in his eyes. He had no idea what Elvis meant when he said they were going to change the show. Elvis walked toward the musicians. Let's do something different. The bandleader looked at him. Different. Elvis nodded. Yeah, bring the microphone down here. A microphone stand was quickly moved toward the edge of the stage. The audience began whispering. People were looking at each other. Some were pointing toward Daniel. Others were already standing to get a better view. Elvis returned to the boy. Daniel, you know any of my songs? Daniel laughed nervously. A few. A few. Elvis raised an eyebrow. His mother smiled. He knows almost all of them. The audience laughed. Elvis grinned. Well, that's good. He turned toward the crowd. Because tonight, I think I'm going to let him choose what we sing. The crowd erupted. Daniel looked shocked. Me? You? Elvis crouched beside him. Pick one. Daniel opened his little notebook again. His fingers trembled as he turned the pages. There were dozens of handwritten titles. Elvis looked over his shoulder. You've been studying. Daniel nodded. I listen every night. Elvis smiled. Every night. Sometimes my mom tells me to turn it down. The audience laughed. Even Daniel's mother laughed. Elvis looked at her. I know how that goes. She shook her head, smiling through her tears. Then Daniel pointed to a song. This one. Elvis looked at the title. He nodded slowly. Good choice. The musicians prepared. But then Elvis stopped them. Wait. He looked at Daniel. Do you want to sing it? Daniel's eyes widened. No. Why not? I can't sing like you. The audience laughed softly. Elvis shook his head. Son, nobody sings like me. The crowd cheered. Elvis smiled. But that's not the point. He tapped Daniel gently on the shoulder. You don't have to sound like me. He leaned closer. Just sound like you. Daniel stared at him. Those words seemed to reach somewhere deep inside him. His mother whispered, You can do it. Daniel looked at her. Then at Elvis. Finally, he nodded. A microphone was placed in front of him. The audience became quiet. The musicians began playing. Daniel took a breath. Nothing happened. His mouth opened. But his voice didn't come. He looked terrified. Elvis immediately stepped closer. It's okay. Daniel tried again. This time, a tiny sound came out. The first words were almost a whisper. But they were enough. The audience listened. No one laughed. No one shouted. They simply listened. Daniel continued. His voice wasn't powerful. It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. But it was honest. Elvis stood beside him, quietly encouraging him. That's it. Keep going. You've got it. Daniel sang another line. Then another. And suddenly, something incredible happened. The audience began singing with him. Thousands of people joined in. Daniel looked up. His eyes widened. He couldn't believe it. He was no longer alone. Elvis smiled. See? Daniel laughed. The song continued. And for those few minutes, the arena became something completely different. There was no superstar. No fan. No distance between the stage and the seats. There was only music. When Daniel reached the final line, his voice cracked. He stopped. Elvis finished the line for him. The audience erupted. Daniel lowered the microphone. He looked at Elvis. I did it. Elvis nodded. You sure did. Then Elvis pulled the boy into a gentle hug. The audience went wild. Daniel's mother stood up, crying. She covered her face with both hands. She had dreamed of seeing her son happy, but she had never imagined this. Elvis released Daniel and looked at his mother. Ma'am. She looked at him. Thank you for bringing him. She shook her head. No, thank you. Elvis smiled. Then he turned back toward the audience. But before he could say anything, someone in the crowd shouted, Elvis, we love you. Another voice shouted, We love Daniel. The entire arena followed. We love Daniel. Daniel looked around in disbelief. He had come to hear Elvis. Now thousands of people were shouting his name. He began crying. Elvis put a hand on his shoulder. Don't cry. Daniel laughed through his tears. I can't help it. Elvis smiled. Neither can I. For a moment, Elvis looked down. His eyes were wet. Then he raised the microphone. I want everybody here to remember something. The crowd became quiet. Sometimes we think we're coming to a concert to see somebody else. He looked at Daniel. But maybe. He paused. Sometimes we're brought here because somebody needs us. The audience applauded. Elvis continued. You never know what somebody sitting next to you is going through. He pointed toward the crowd. So be kind. The applause grew louder. Be patient. More applause. And if somebody needs a hand. Elvis looked at Daniel. Give them yours. The entire arena stood. Daniel's mother was crying again. But this time she was smiling. Red, your turn. If you were in that arena, would you have wanted Elvis to continue the concert or spend the rest of the night with Daniel? A. Continue the concert. B. Stay with Daniel. C. Invite Daniel to sing another song. Comment A, B, or C below. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from, city and country. If this moment touched you, hit like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who believes small acts of kindness can change a person's life. Now let's go back to the night when Elvis made a decision nobody in that arena expected. Elvis helped Daniel move his wheelchair closer to the stage. The boy was still holding his little notebook. Elvis noticed it again. Can I see that? Daniel handed it to him. Elvis flipped through the pages. There were song titles, little notes, dates, even small drawings of Elvis performing. Elvis laughed. You drew me. Daniel nodded. Not very good. Elvis looked at one of the drawings. It showed Elvis standing on stage with a microphone. The picture was simple, but Elvis stared at it for several seconds. Then his expression changed. You know something. Daniel waited. This is pretty good. Daniel smiled. You really think so? I wouldn't lie to you. Elvis closed the notebook. Then he did something unexpected. He took a pen from one of the musicians. He opened the notebook to the first blank page. And he wrote something. Daniel watched closely. When Elvis finished, he handed the notebook back. Daniel read the message. His eyes filled with tears. He looked up. What does it say? Elvis smiled. You'll know when you need it. Daniel looked down again. His mother leaned over. She read the words and immediately started crying. Because Elvis had written, Keep listening, the world still has beautiful things to say. Daniel held the notebook against his chest. Elvis stood. For several seconds, he didn't say anything. Then he turned toward the musicians. "Let's give this kid another song." The band began playing. The crowd cheered. Daniel smiled. But Elvis suddenly stopped. He looked at the audience. No. The musicians stopped. Everyone looked confused. Elvis pointed toward Daniel. "This one isn't for the audience." He smiled. "This one's for him." The lights above the arena slowly dimmed. A single spotlight remained on Elvis and Daniel. The musicians began a soft introduction. Elvis started singing. Daniel listened. Every word, every note, every breath. He closed his eyes. His mother held his hand. The crowd became silent. For several minutes, nobody moved. Then Daniel opened his eyes. He looked at his mother. She knew what he was thinking. She leaned toward him. "What is it?" Daniel whispered. "I don't want it to end." His mother squeezed his hand. "I know." On stage, Elvis continued singing. But halfway through the song, he noticed Daniel looking down. He stopped. The music faded. Elvis walked over. "What's wrong?" Daniel looked up. "I wish I could hear this forever." Elvis's expression became serious. He knelt beside him. "You may not be able to control what happens tomorrow." Daniel nodded. "But tonight," Elvis pointed around the arena. "Tonight you can remember." Daniel wiped his eyes. "How?" Elvis smiled. "Close your eyes." Daniel did. "Now listen." The arena became silent. Elvis whispered, "Listen to the crowd." Thousands of people remained completely quiet. "Listen to the band." A soft note played. "Listen to your mother." She whispered, "I love you." Daniel smiled. Then Elvis said, "And listen to yourself." Daniel opened his eyes. "What?" Elvis smiled. "You're here." Daniel nodded. "You're alive." Daniel's eyes filled with tears again. "And you're surrounded by people who care about you." Elvis stood. "That is something nobody can take away from you." The crowd began applauding. Slowly, then louder. Daniel looked around. The boy who had entered the arena afraid of losing his hearing was now surrounded by thousands of people making noise for him. He laughed, and Elvis laughed with him. But then something happened backstage that nobody in the audience knew about. A member of Elvis's crew hurried toward the stage. He whispered something into Elvis's ear. Elvis's smile disappeared. He looked toward Daniel's mother, then toward the backstage entrance. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Elvis quietly asked, "Are you sure?" The crew member nodded. Elvis looked back at Daniel. For several seconds, he didn't speak. Then he took a deep breath. Because the news he had just received was about to change the rest of the night. And Daniel was about to hear something that would make him wonder whether his dream had really come true, or whether Elvis had planned something far bigger all along. The backstage messenger stood beside Elvis for several seconds. The music had stopped. The audience was confused. Thousands of people were still watching the stage, wondering why Elvis had suddenly become so serious. Daniel looked up at him. "What happened?" Elvis didn't answer immediately. He looked toward Daniel's mother. Then he walked closer to her. "Ma'am." She stood. "Yes." The crew member quietly explained what had happened. Daniel's mother listened. Her face changed. She looked toward her son, then back at Elvis. What do we do? Elvis took a deep breath. We don't tell him yet. Daniel could see that something was happening. Mom. She quickly smiled. Everything's okay. But Daniel knew she was hiding something. He looked at Elvis. Is something wrong? Elvis crouched beside him. No, son. Daniel stared into his eyes. Are you sure? Elvis smiled. I'm sure. Then he stood. He walked toward the musicians. Let's finish this. The band started again. But something about Elvis had changed. His voice was softer, more emotional. He wasn't performing for the thousands of people anymore. He was singing for one boy who was trying to hold on to every sound. When the song ended, the crowd stood and applauded. Daniel smiled. Then Elvis walked back toward him. Daniel. Yes. You told me you wanted to hear me one last time. Daniel nodded. Well, Elvis smiled. I don't think one night is enough. Daniel looked confused. What do you mean? Elvis looked toward the audience, then toward the crew, then back at Daniel. I think you need something to remember this night by. Daniel's mother began crying again. Elvis reached behind him. A crew member handed him something. It was a small black case. Elvis opened it. Inside was a beautiful microphone. Daniel stared at it. Is that yours? Elvis smiled. It was. Daniel looked confused. Elvis held it out. Now it's yours. Daniel immediately shook his head. No, I can't take that. Why not? It's yours. Elvis laughed softly. I've got another one. Daniel still hesitated. His mother whispered, Take it. Daniel reached out. Elvis placed the microphone in his hands. This microphone has been on a lot of stages. Daniel looked at it carefully. Really? Yeah. Elvis nodded. But tonight it did something more important. What? It helped me hear you. Daniel couldn't speak. He looked down at the microphone. Then he hugged it against his chest. The crowd erupted. Elvis looked toward the audience. Remember something. The cheering slowly faded. People think a microphone is for making your voice louder. He paused. But sometimes. He looked at Daniel. It's for making sure someone's voice doesn't disappear. The arena became completely silent. Daniel's mother broke down crying. Elvis placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't worry. She nodded through her tears. I've got him. Read one last question. Before we continue, tell us honestly. If Elvis gave you something this meaningful, would you keep it forever? Write yes or no in the comments. And tell us where you're watching from, your city and country. If you've enjoyed this emotional story, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves stories about kindness, courage, and unforgettable moments. Now let's return to the final moments of that extraordinary night. The concert continued. But it was no longer a normal concert. Elvis kept Daniel beside the stage. Every few songs, he would look toward him. Daniel would smile. Sometimes Elvis would wave. Sometimes Daniel would raise the microphone Elvis had given him. The crowd would cheer. Eventually, the final song arrived. The musicians played the opening notes. The audience knew it was almost over. Elvis looked at Daniel. Ready? Daniel nodded. For what? For the last song, Daniel's smile faded. I don't want it to end. Elvis smiled. Neither do I. The song began. Elvis sang. The audience sang with him. Daniel listened. His mother held his hand. And as the final notes filled the arena, Daniel closed his eyes. He tried to memorize everything. The music, the crowd, his mother's voice, Elvis's voice, the feeling of being surrounded by thousands of strangers who had somehow become part of his story. Then the music stopped. For 1 second, there was silence. And then the arena exploded. Thousands of people stood. Elvis looked toward Daniel. He walked over. He placed one hand on the boy's shoulder. Then he leaned toward the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen. The audience became quiet. I want you to remember this young man. Daniel looked shocked. Elvis continued. His name is Daniel. The crowd shouted his name. Daniel. Daniel laughed through his tears. Elvis smiled. He came here tonight because he was afraid he was running out of time to hear. The audience became silent. But I think he reminded all of us. Elvis looked around the arena. That we shouldn't wait until we're losing something to appreciate it. The crowd applauded. Elvis continued. Don't wait to tell somebody you love them. More applause. Don't wait to say thank you. The applause grew louder. And don't wait for tomorrow to do something good. Then Elvis turned toward Daniel. Because tomorrow isn't promised. Daniel looked at him. Elvis held out his hand. Daniel took it. The audience began cheering again. Elvis leaned closer. You remember what I told you? Daniel nodded. Keep listening. Elvis smiled. The world still has beautiful things to say. Daniel smiled. I'll remember. Elvis hugged him. The crowd erupted one final time. And then the lights began to fade. But the story didn't end when the concert ended. Later that night, backstage, Daniel sat quietly beside his mother. He was holding the microphone Elvis had given him. He still couldn't believe it was real. Then the door opened. Elvis walked in. Daniel smiled. You came back. Elvis laughed. Of course I did. He sat beside him. For a few minutes, they talked. Not about fame. Not about concerts. Not about music. They talked about school. About Daniel's favorite songs. About his dreams. And then Elvis asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Daniel thought about it. I don't know. Elvis smiled. You don't have to know yet. Daniel looked at him. Did you always know what you wanted? Elvis laughed. No. Really? Really? Elvis leaned back. Life changes. Daniel nodded. Elvis pointed toward the microphone. But whatever you do. He paused. Use your voice. Daniel smiled. I will. Elvis stood. Before leaving, he turned around. And Daniel. Yes. Next time you come to my concert. Daniel smiled. When? Elvis laughed. Whenever you want. Then he added. You're not sitting in the audience. Daniel looked surprised. Where will I sit? Elvis pointed toward the stage. Right beside me. Daniel laughed. His mother started crying again. But this time, the tears were different. They weren't tears of fear. They were tears of hope. Years later, Daniel would still remember that night. He wouldn't remember every song. He wouldn't remember every light. He wouldn't remember every face in the crowd. But he would remember one thing. A famous man had thousands of people watching him. And yet, when he saw one frightened boy in a wheelchair, he stopped. He listened. And he made that boy feel like the most important person in the room. Because sometimes the greatest thing a person can give isn't money. It isn't fame. It isn't even a song. Sometimes it's simply stopping long enough to listen. And that night, Elvis didn't just give Daniel a concert. He gave him a memory, a reason to smile, a reason to keep listening, and a reminder that even when life becomes frightening, there can still be beautiful sounds waiting around the corner. The final image of that night remained burned into Daniel's memory. Elvis standing beneath the golden lights, Daniel beside him, and thousands of people applauding. Two people from completely different worlds, connected by one song, one microphone, and one unforgettable night. Because Daniel had come to the concert believing he was about to lose something. Instead, he discovered something he would carry for the rest of his life. Hope.